Hello, YouTube. Just wanted to take a few moments and give you my opinion on these Titan X3 lever arms. So, there's not a whole lot of folks who have given their reviews of these. Of course, Coop has done reviews on the Rogue and the Soren X and the Rep arms. And, there's maybe a couple people that have talked about these, but there's not been a whole lot of detail. And so I thought I'd just take a minute and give you my perspective on them. I've had them about a week now, I think. So let's jump into a couple of the things about Titan real fast. So generally speaking, I don't own a lot of Titan stuff. My rack is a Rogue. I've got a Titan wall storage unit. I've got a Titan landmine. Couple small things. I don't generally buy a lot of Titan products. I know they've gotten a little better in recent years, but one time I ordered some dumbbell handles from them and they sent me a bar. Another time I ordered, I don't remember what it was, stuff that showed up real damaged, and so I don't buy a whole lot of Chinese stuff if I can get away from it. But this is one particular thing that I think is probably worth your money, so I'll explain why. Let's first talk a little bit about how these differ from the competition. So the big one is going to be price. So let's just get that out of the way right now while I'm thinking about it. These are $288 shipped to my house with tax, if memory serves, and they showed up in 3 days. So that was great. The packaging was fine, no problem, and they sent me the right thing. The Rogue version is $900 and some odd dollars, and the Soren X ones are a little bit more expensive than that. Reps are $400, but that doesn't include tax or shipping, and Reps shipping is pretty high most of the time, in my opinion. So these are dramatically less expensive than the competition, and I'm not generally somebody who buys the cheapest thing. I'm willing to pony up for quality most of the time. But this style of arm actually has some advantages that we'll go over in a moment. So, first and foremost, the difference between this type of arm and the more expensive options is the attachment system to the rack itself. So on the Rogue, the Soren X, and the Rep to a little lesser degree, they have a mechanism by which they mount to the upright of your rack permanently. And then with the Rogue and the Soren X, they have different methods for taking the slack out so it'll be nice and tight, so there won't be slop in it. And then the Rep, they don't have that, but they just make it a pretty tight tolerance. It's got UHMW in it, so it's sort of a cheaper way to do that, but supposedly still works pretty good. These have a very different attachment method. So these, you'll notice I took a cross pin out on this side, and then on the inside, you'll notice there's a straight pin there. So what this does is the pin goes into a hole on the front of the rack, slides in, and then you cross pin through this slot, and that's how it gets held in there. Now, once it's pinned, there's not, the slop on it is pretty minimal from the bracket itself. So the bracket's it doesn't have a lot of side-to-side slop. It does have some forward and aft slop like this. But if this arm is loaded out here, it should be pulling down and taking that slack out. So I don't think that's a huge problem. One of the areas where this is a superior design, now it's inferior in the fact that it's a pain to take it on and off, and it's kind of a pain to adjust it. And if you're a small person, if you're a 110-pound female, this is going to kind of suck, if I'm completely honest. These arms weigh, well, the box they came in, the two of them, weighed 100 pounds. So these are 45 probably, something like that. with the arms on them and the plate pegs that I'll show you in a minute. This right here is probably 35 or something like that. But the other reason that these suck to move is because of the way that this is designed. If you want to pull this out, your hand is naturally going to go to the balance point right here where you can just pull straight out because you have to pull straight out on the bracket to get it out. The trouble is if you do that, because the pivot is here, all the weight of this bracket is immediately going to swing down and pinch your finger against the arm itself, which is really not very comfortable. It's not nice. And so the way you can kind of get around that is you could kind of shove your hand up in here and then just hold it. That's not great. You can't really grab it here because there's nowhere to grab. It's not ergonomic at all. So the sort of cheater way, if it's up high like this, you can kind of make it, bring it down like this and do that. Did you hear that? That's the feeling. That's the sound of your finger getting pinched in there if you grab it and then pull it out. So the next thing that I want to talk about a little bit here, and I don't know if this is in the shot. Sorry about that noise. I know this is looks like it's filmed on a potato, and there's no video editing and all that stuff. I don't care to learn how to do video editing, and it basically is shot with a potato. This is a 5-year-old smartphone, but if you don't piss away all your money getting a new iPhone every 6 months, you got money to buy lever arms, so remember that. Anyway, the other area where there's some slop in these arms is here. See this? So there is a hole in the arm, and then they have these 2 through bolts that go together, and there's a bronze bushing in here. Now, I think I'm going to be able to get this slop out by going to the hardware store and buying a couple of washers that are just big enough to fit into these 2 slots right here if I kind of center the arm. Now, it's going to introduce a little bit of drag, but because this is bronze on the outside, I think it'll be fine. And so that should be able to eliminate some of this side-to-side play, but I'll get back to you on that. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about with these? Why would you buy lever arms, or should you buy lever arms? So, Coop did a video the other, maybe it was a couple of months ago now, where somebody asked him if he thought lever arms were worth the money. And he said no, for most people. And I have to say, I actually kind of agree with him. For the most part, these aren't really worth buying for most people, especially not the really expensive versions. Now, these, because they're cheap enough, I mean, $300 still ain't nothing, but I think that they're probably worth your money, and I'll explain why in just a moment. Although I wouldn't say that the more expensive versions were worth your money. Actually, before we get to that, one more thing I just wanted to talk about is the powder coat. So, as you can see, Rogue Upright, Titan, lever arm. The powder coat's close. It's not an exact match. And Titan's is easier to scuff than Rogue's is. But really, it's not so bad. And there's no Titan logos anywhere on here, so if somebody came over, they would never suspect that this was brand mixing. And the other thing is, as you maybe saw, this cross pin goes in a slot. So this slot is about 3.5, 4 inches long. And because the Rogue upright holes are not at the same spacing on the sides as Titans are, you can't use every single position with this as it is. Although you can use quite a few, and I haven't had any problems with that. I've been able to set it at the right heights to do what I want to do with it. But if you wanted to solve that problem, all you got to do is go out in the garage and get your drill or put it in a drill press, or if you're real fancy, mill this slot longer. And then if you have a little bit longer slot, then in every one of these holes you have a wider range for which one of these cross holes can fall in, and you'll be able to bolt it in and it'll be good. So you could expand that and fix that problem. But anyway, so the reasons that people would buy these arms, I think generally, if you look at the marketing for them, it's kind of ridiculous. So you'll see people, well, they got the handles on here and they're doing this movement here, which is, the hell is that? Nobody's doing triphasic training. Nobody does that shit. It's worthless. The other problem with this and using it for most movements, let's say that you want to, for some reason you don't want to press with a bar and you want to put the handle and plate peg on here and you want to do overhead press with this. Well, there's no point, because this is a pivot, it's a moment arm based loading structure. At no point can I press straight up on this, because it's changing angularity the entire time it moves. So you're shifting the moment arm of the movement, which is dumb. It's not a very effective, it's a suboptimal way to load most movement patterns. If you're pressing with a bar, you're pressing the bar in a straight vertical line over the middle of your foot, your balance point, through the entire movement pattern. And if you get out of balance, boy, you lose a lot in terms of how much you can press. If you can press 200 pounds and you get an inch forward of center, 135 maybe. So there's a big problem with this, because it's purposefully changing where the load is relative to your center of gravity, because the arm is changing angle all the time. So I think it's kind of dumb to use it for those sorts of things. I do also you could make a case for, if you want to set these up with a spotter underneath them, and you want to just burn yourself out on drop sets on bench or incline bench or even overhead press or something, where you're just doing a bunch of volume and you're not really caring about perfect technique and you're not trying to load it real heavy, fine. That's okay, but I wouldn't buy them for that purpose. So what purpose did I buy them for? Well, the first thing is this. So there's another video I put up the other day, and it shows off this DIY belt squat here. And I'm not going to go over it in detail because you can just watch that video. This is going to be long enough the way it is. So this is a real handy setup. The other thing that you can do with these that's pretty cool is you can make your own rack-mounted leg press with these. Now, you'll see on, Titan's website and other manufacturers where they've got the arm up in this position like this, and then they've got a clamped, like Titan makes a foot plate that goes between the two arms, and then they've got somebody sitting on an incline bench here pushing straight out with their feet, right? So they'd be on an incline bench here, and they'd be pushing with their feet this way. So do you understand, if you have a rudimentary understanding of physics, do you know how much more you're going to have to put load here, because you're pushing this direction and the force is down, it's not back. So it's ridiculous to think that you can load that angle, very effectively, do much of anything. You'd have to weigh these really, really, really heavy, and still it would be damn near useless. I mean, just utterly useless. And the third aspect of that, or second, I don't know, I lost count, is that you also need to find a way to keep your bench from getting slid back this way. So you got to come up with some kind of crossbar or put a bar in J-cups, and maybe the spacing's right, and maybe it's not. This is foolish nonsense. Don't do that. Don't screw with that. Here is how you do a leg press setup with lever arms, and you can load them in a legitimate way. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take both lever arms and you put them down like this at whatever height gives you a pretty horizontal angle. This is actually a pretty good angle. Then you take the plate pegs and you put them on the top, and you put them way out here, right? Just put them in these two holes like this with the plate peg sticking straight up. Then you load all your weights onto that. You're going to have some sort of a safety system for this, some sort of a catch, right? And like what I did the other day is I took these pull blocks I've got and I just set them up on their side. Actually, I think I set them up the tall way to where the rubber was sitting on the top of the pull block, and then I could get underneath it and I could press up on it, and then I just sat it back down on the block. I'm gonna come up with some sort of system. I just haven't done it yet, and I haven't thought through it yet, where I can get under it and it's fully up, and then I can just lift and pull some sort of safety out or move something out of the way, and then get a nice deep range of motion, and then lock it back in the top position rather than having to wedge yourself into the bottom. Like if you've ever used a commercial leg press, some of them, like the 45-degree ones, you get in it and you just, you barely straighten your leg and you take the load and then you flop that handle over that's the safety, and then it can come all the way down. So I'm going to come up with some kind of system for that. But here's, so you put the plate pegs there, and then you get a foot plate. You either buy a commercial foot plate or you just make one, and that's what I'm going to do. So I have this piece of a board that came out of a table that I just cannibalized in my house because I didn't want it anymore. And as you can see, I got real lucky with this. It is lengthwise just what I need. See this? So there's just enough length here that it spans perfectly the two arms. Now, two things are going to have to be addressed with this that are also going to be addressed if you buy Titan's foot plate. The first one is that this is flat, and so is Titan's. And remember, we talked about the angularity and the changing of moment arms. If you're laying on your back right here, as you start pressing with your legs, the angle changes. So imagine you have your ankles, and you're pushing against a flat board right here. As this goes up, your ankles have to come more and more and more into dorsiflexion. And that's a problem because really quickly, early in the movement pattern, I found this out the other day when I was playing around with it, you run out of dorsiflexion and then the load is getting shifted backwards, is getting shifted up onto the ball of your foot and much more into your knee. So the way you fix that is that you build a little bit of angularity into the board. So let me see if I can show you what I'm talking about. So you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit. Obviously, this would not sit on the upside, on the top side of the lever arm. It would be on the underside of the lever arm. But you can see here, right, the angle is flat against the lever arm. Now, if instead of flat, if you build a little bit of angle like this, now you've given yourself artificial dorsiflexion in the start, and that will allow you to counteract that changing of angle as the lever arm moves. And that's what they do on any sort of a lever-based leg press, a commercial. If you have one where it pivots like this, that's how they do it. As you'll notice, the foot platform is slanted considerably. So you can do that, and I'm going to end up doing that with this because of reason number 2, which is if you're going to make it yourself, if you're using something like this, you need to reinforce it. This is not stressed as a little half-inch piece of board stock. It's not strong enough to hold the weight of leg pressing. So what I'll do is I'll just take a couple of 2x4s and run supports along the length of it, and that'll give me a place to drill so I can attach this to the arms with side pins, and then I'll build how they attach. I will build a little bit of, I'll just either cut a board at an angle or, I'll come up with something to shim so that it gets, so the angle gets changed. So you can do this pretty inexpensively. You can go to Lowe's and buy a couple of 2x10s or 2x12s and make yourself a foot platform here for $50, $60, something like that. Not a lot of money. And then you've got a nice leg press in your home gym that completely stores away. Everything stores away. And you can load real heavy because you can put the plate pegs all the way out here and you can just stack weight on the top of it. And you could even build a couple pins into the foot platform itself and stack more weight there. Or you could put different, put more pins on here and stack more weight on there. I mean, you could load this pretty darn heavy. And the one place you got to be careful with that is, even if you've got a bolt down rack, you're really going to want to think about the angles, because if you've got, let's say you got 500 pounds on a leg press and it's out here, you really want it to be supported. You want a safety under here so that it's not pulling and wanting to yank the rack over on top of you. Now with mine, I've got a reverse hyper mounted on this back upright over here, which is real heavy. And then I'm going to have my safeties are going to be out here where the weight catches. I've seen guys do this kind of thing where they had a chain that went between here and the front post. But if you think about it, if you slam the weight down onto that chain, boom, it's wanting to pull forward on this upright and it could topple the whole rack on top of you. So you got to be real cautious of that. And, kind of test the stuff out, not underneath it when you're putting it all together. But, it can all, with a little bit of intelligent design, you can defeat all of these hurdles. And now you've got, not only do you have a belt squat that's fully functional and good for a couple $100, but that same couple $100 gives you a really solid leg press. And I'll make a video when I get mine together on how you can do that. The last part of this that I want to talk about that's different about the Titan leg or lever arms versus competition is you'll notice this arm, when it's stored, has nothing on it. So because it doesn't permanently get attached to the upright, I could take this off and put it in the floor or put it somewhere else if I wanted to in 30 seconds. But also, unlike the other all the other competition, the handles and the plate pegs are separate on the Titans. So you'll see these are bolted with one bolt that goes through. Now this is on a spotter arm, but it would go on the lever arm. So you'd have one handle on one side and a plate peg on the other, and then they sandwich together and they go, about here, and then this is how you push on the thing. But because they're just bolted together, you can take them apart and you can do cool stuff like this, where I've got the handles up here and both plate pegs down here. And that's really nice. On the competition, it's all one unit. So the handle and the plate peg will be one unit, and there will be a bracket that's, goes across the top like this and just cross pins, and it'll all be one thing, which means that you don't really have the option to do this anymore. The other thing that's kind of cool about this aspect is that these stow away out of the way really easily. So I can make this be fine, no big deal. It's not in my way at all, versus if I had a handle here that would be actually probably stick out like that, and then a plate peg that would stick out way out here. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of room to walk on this side to load the bar if I'm benching or something anyway. The last thing I want to do is be running into a plate post over here or running into a handle over here trying to get in and out of the rack. If you got a big gym, hey, that probably isn't an issue for you, but in a small gym, this is a big deal. So these are cool because I can just, again, these are just finger tight on here. I can take these off, in 5 seconds, and then I can store them up here on this cross member on the inside. So I'll put the handle right here. So I'll shove the handle up onto the inside of this hitch pin, that'll hold it. And then I'll pivot it up and put the other bolt in right here. So the handle sticks up here like so. And again, for reference, you can see the belt squat video because they're mounted up there. Are they? I don't know. I'll show this at some point. And then the plate peg does the same thing over here. And that's cool because now I have no more, it's not in my way, and I have a multi-grip pull-up bar. I have 2 multi-grip handles on each side, so I have a multi-grip pull-up bar now. So that's something the Titans can do that the competitors cannot do. One more thing I want to mention that's a downside of these is the bracket design. You'll see here I have this spotter strap, and it can't go all the way into the hole and work over here because it runs into the bracket. The only way that you can use the spotter arms in a position where the arm is attached is to just take the arm completely off or move it to a different position. So that's a little bit annoying. It would be cool if I could just leave this belt squat set up here all the time, but I can't because I use this as a foot hold or a leg hold down for lat pull downs, and I also use it for an ankle holder for Nordic curls. And so this is just it's not feasible. I have to take it out every time I want to do that. I may if I move the belt squat over to this side, I could remedy that problem because the way this is set up, you see these arms here. This is just hanging back here, so it's up out of the way, but this cable drops down right here and it has a loading pin, and I put plates on it, and then this runs across, and this arm, when it's not in use with the belt squat, hangs out this direction, and that pulley clips to it, and now I can pull straight down. So I have a lat pull down machine right here, and there's a video on that as well. But anyway, let's see if there's anything else I want to talk about. I think that's about it. Generally speaking, as long as your expectations are correct, I think these are a great purchase. If you are somebody who's DIY oriented, these are fantastic because they don't cost that much. Oh, here's another DIY thing I think I'm going to do at one point. Coop talked about in the Rep Fitness lever arm video, Rep has a place on their bracket where you can run a cross pin in just a couple, like 1 or 2 spots, and the arm can be permanently, like it can be locked up at maybe this kind of an angle or something like that. And he suggested that they expand this bracket out a little bit and then put a bunch of holes in it so you could lock the arm at all different angles. I think I may make a plate and weld a plate on here and do just that for this because, one, it would be cool to be able to lock them up out of the way. 2, it would eliminate the problem with the finger pinching because you could lock the arm and then it's all one unit and it's not going to fall down and pinch your hand when you're moving the thing around. So I may do that at some point. It just really depends on how much I fool with these and whether or not they get adjusted and moved all that often or not. But yeah, that's my general thoughts on the Titan X3 lever arms, and I hope that's helpful.